What's up, YouTube? Welcome to the Counting Wisdom podcast. I think one of the problems with artificial intelligence is that, it is developed by people who have already put in their preset bias on how artificial intelligence should work. You could see that, if another group did create artificial intelligence, then it would be subject to their inputs. And I think one of the things that artificial intelligence should be able to do is to learn from all the different worldviews, all the different opinions out there, and to be able to calculate on its own according to the questions that it gets, it be able to calculate its own answers based off of all of the knowledge that it has, not necessarily based off of a certain leaning of bias on certain specific subjects. And I think this is why religion is so, pivotal in our lives. It's just because, when it comes to a lot of different beliefs about the world and, about what we should do here or what we should do there, some of the, facts can be sort of based off of a religious view. I mean, I know the people who created OpenAI don't necessarily view themselves as, having a bias, but, when you think about it, it's sort of giving certain answers based off of maybe science. And you can tell that even, obviously this is a Christian channel, but even, some of the answers that you can sort of get from AI, it would offend maybe the Muslim community, it would offend the Christian community. And so, it would offend maybe a Hindu. And so I think one of the downsides of artificial intelligence, at least pertaining to some questions, is that it doesn't necessarily give the question the viewpoint from a completely neutral type of category. Now, obviously, this is a Christian channel, again, so I don't necessarily think that the artificial intelligence should, remain completely neutral. But, I have my own viewpoints and beliefs. But being in the world that we are in currently, I think AI should have a universally neutral answer, especially to some specific questions. Now, I do think that, maybe that is a little bit hard to navigate, but especially when you ask it about, like, hey, where did the earth come from? Or like, what is this Big Bang Theory? When I asked it those questions, it didn't necessarily say, hey, this is a specific belief pertaining to these groups of people. It still talked about it as if, hey, everyone believes this, and it sort of separated, religion out of it, and I'm not necessarily strictly talking about from a Christian perspective, just because, even as an artificial intelligence, it should remain neutral. And it sort of lied in that, when I asked it, certain questions, it said, hey, I'm completely neutral in my answer. But yet, when you ask it certain questions, it already has pre-designed, answers that do pertain to a particular group. And I just know personally, I think I would have preferred more if a completely honestly neutral answer rather than, stating something that is based off of science only. When it comes down to science, even science can't be completely neutral because it invades into certain people's religious beliefs. People don't necessarily believe that, the world was created by a big bang. Some people believe that there is a God that created it. Obviously, in the Christian community, we believe that Jesus created the world. But I think from the standpoint of, strictly artificial intelligence, you can tell that the answers aren't really that neutral. And I just found it having a lack of intelligence as far as being able to even give a neutral answer. I know if I were asked that question, I know I would at least think of saying it in such a way as, hey, we have different beliefs as far as how the world was created. But you can even tell that if you were to ask this artificial intelligence, hey, can you mathematically calculate the possibility of there being a God? It seems like I think I've seen a few videos of people doing some math and saying how, hey, it's not necessarily based off of science or math. It's not mathematically possible for this to be created without there being a God. Of course, I highly doubt that anyone can really think of, how God exists himself without God actually telling us. But at least, for the basis of, artificial intelligence, I think that, the people creating it need to be a little bit more open, I guess, going to the open AI. I think the people need to be a little bit more open to everyone's beliefs. And also, I think it is a great start, of course, but I know some of the basic answers that I was getting, I was some of the basic questions that I was asking, it did not come from a neutral perspective. And I think that's really what's wrong with, a lot of our public schools too. And I know many of us in the Christian community do view atheism as a religion in of itself, even though they don't necessarily view themselves as being religious. We know that their practices are similar to a religious belief in some ways. And so obviously I think this, may not ever happen, but I think that, they do need to create this artificial intelligence from a more neutral standpoint, even though, this, the computer system, the software says that it is neutral in the answers that it gives. It really isn't when you really think of the word neutral and, the type of answers it should be giving. Obviously, I think, the answer that if I were to actually talk to an OpenAI person, they would say, oh, hey, we're still developing it, hey, we're still working out the kinks, and, it doesn't necessarily work as well as it should. But I can tell that it's already from the start, at least from what it's capable of doing, it's already developed with a sort of, leaning towards a certain area, even though they could give the answer of how, hey, we're not leaning towards a certain area. It's supposed to be artificial intelligence, strictly, helpful and neutral in its decisions. But, I know from my opinion, it is not really that neutral. And so, anyway, thanks for listening to this short podcast on my review of OpenAI and the artificial intelligence chat GPT. And so, I even in my answer, you can tell that, I didn't necessarily say that, I wanted it to give an answer of, hey, Jesus is the creator or something like that. But, I at least wanted it to be more accommodating to, different beliefs. And if I really were to think about this, it probably carries over into other areas in its software where it's not necessarily coming from a neutral standpoint. And so I think that, is a little bit of a downside in that, atheism, they push their, religion, as many of us Christians like to call it. They push their religion on us and on the world in massive numbers, especially on our kids in public school, and they want everyone to believe from their scientific, point of view. And so when they create this software, which I think obviously, hey, none of us are really creating that software. But one of the things I wanted to make a, note on is that someone needs to, just like we see in the Terminator movies, and I'm sure hopefully someone is doing this already, but there needs to be a sort of anti kind of police force software for this type of stuff. Now, obviously, when we talk about, I asked AI, hey, do you have a consciousness? Are you really alive? It said, no, I'm just a software, I'm not alive. But when we talk about some of the things that, is possible, from the Christian perspective, we do have the saying of how, God has already stated that, in Genesis, that anything that people can think of to do, it is possible for us to do. Now, obviously, it could take some years or, many, many years to sort of get there. But, and I don't know if God is even going to let us get to everything that we would think of to be developed, just because when you look at the Tower of Babel story and different things like that, it becomes clear that, God does have a sort of timeline for a lot of this stuff. But anyway, when you think of, OpenAI creating a software that can actually have some form or similarity to consciousness and being alive, what comes out to me is that there needs to be some sort of policing, some company that is fighting this, kind of like, making a robot that kills other robots, basically, is what I'm saying. And we need to definitely have, obviously they've talked about, regulating this stuff, but I'm talking about, not just regulations that, you're just, hey, we're going to fine, OpenAI, but I guess in the form of a scammer or a hacker needs to be able to, fight this type of software, and especially when it's put into robots. I think that we need a company that is able to fight these things, especially when what they're developing is geared to a certain bias or opinion. Now, obviously, I also have my own personal thoughts about how far this thing will go. We know the end of the story for us in the Christian community, that, I don't think, the Bible necessarily describes a complete world of, robots and people, living for many, many years in existence and, getting into maybe some of the movies that we've sort of seen, developed, we know that Jesus comes back and, sets up his government here on the earth. But just as an idea out there, I do think there needs to be, I don't know if hacker is the right word, because I'm not necessarily supporting hacking in the sense of how, hackers, attack people and steal their money and different things like that. But I am talking about some line of defense in regards to OpenAI, just because I think from the little time that I spent on their software, it's clear that you cannot necessarily trust these people to be completely neutral in their, creating of this software. And even though I think the evidence of this is very simple and maybe a little bit of a preliminary, a little bit of a, kind of an early kind of jump on this, but, if this can sort of snowball, I think there is a little bit of evidence of how, the people who are developing this is not necessarily interested in sort of catering to everybody. And I know it's hard to cater to everybody. And of course, that's not our view as Christian community and people who believe in Jesus. We believe that Jesus is going to ultimately reign. And in some ways, he actually does already. God does. But anyway, I think, in this world, we do need someone to, be able to not necessarily trust OpenAI to do what they want to do in, in their own way. And I'm sure, many people are already thinking that way, but I think the government should definitely take this seriously, just because, I know most of us, when we think about robots and artificial intelligence, we don't necessarily go as far as some of the movies that are out there. But when you really look at, when I've seen, at least some of the videos, obviously, you would think that they would show some of these things in a place like Best Buy or Walmart or someone, even, maybe having someone there to sort of protect it, of course. But, they don't actually show any of this in public, And I could guess that for many years, this is probably not going to be even affordable for a lot of us. But, when you talk about even getting into regulating some of this stuff, it becomes sort of crazy in a way when you think about it. And I think that, this is a major sign of a lot of things. I think I could probably, go on talking for at least another hour or two about, some of the, problems with this. But, just wanted to say that when you think about, how, and you can have a robot that, now, of course, it's not saying that it has some sort of, consciousness or level of consciousness, but I do believe it's possible for people to create it. Even though we sort of can talk about robots or different things like that and sort of not necessarily talk about it in a serious way in some sort, but, I think that, we do need, a company that I would say is sort of a policing type of government type of enforcer of, these companies. Now, I think already, I'm sure the government has gotten involved, but I think this software proves that you cannot just let someone develop something like this and freely give it to the world. And especially the implications of, all of it. Now, I do believe God is ultimately in charge. And so that's where I will leave this podcast. I don't believe people do really have the full freedom to do everything that they really think about. And so ultimately, for us who do have faith in Christ, I think that, we don't have to necessarily worry too much. But I think that there are a lot of things that God certainly does allow to happen. And so I do think we do need to be prepared in regards to, being ready for the things that God does allow to happen. And so, thanks so much for checking out this podcast. I think that, I said a lot, and hopefully this was helpful to someone, and I will talk to you on the next one. See ya.